open the chat. Yeah, I see you, Laura. That's awesome.
I'm sure they were great. I haven't gone to any of them. It's been a very busy, chaotic month.
Yeah, everything's been good. I know everybody's really excited about blurbs. Blurbs are important and they're tricky. So
they're so much fun. So
very excited.
I hope you learn to love the blurb.
Give everybody a minute to get settled in here and let
there's Pam and there's Realm Makers. The organization has joined. Thea, Meg. Oh my goodness, so many people. Okay.
All right, everyone. So glad to have you all here again. We're winding down. We've got one more after this, and I'll talk a little bit about that at the end. But I know Janeen's excited to get started. Janeen Ippolito is an extraordinary asset to the writing community, and I am not exaggerating at all. She is phenomenal. She's an author, an editor, a marketer, and a coach. She just does it all, and I don't know how. So maybe we'll have you do that session later. How do you do all of it? She runs Uncommon Universes Press, and she will be at the conference, the 2022 conference. So we're excited to have her join us there. And without further ado, I'm going to share some things in the chat, some links that Janeen is giving us that you can download and take notes in. So you will have to download it, but I'll share that with you guys here pretty quick. But in the meantime, Janeen, would you like to take it away?
Hey there, I am Janeen Ippolito, and real quick, the link, it just has a note section for my outline I'm going to be following. And so if you're the kind of person who wants to take notes, it has like the different headers, and you have to download it. So it's going to open up. If you try to type in, it's not going to work. You're going to open it up, you go to the left-hand corner, your left-hand corner, and you can just click the file and download it. And then it should work fine on your computer. It is a Word doc. Sorry, those of you who don't have Word, I did the best I could on short notice, but hopefully that gives you some sense of structure if you need that. And yes, so I'm doing Blurbs. I'm also an author of over 20 books and other various publications, won awards for them, hit bestseller, helped authors sign contracts and hit bestseller and those kind of things because I believe in spreading the joy around. I do the Author Elevate podcast, and that's pretty fantastic as well. We just started that with Amy Williams. And yeah, I'm the CEO of Uncommon Universes Press, and that's fantastic too. And actually, I do have quite a few systems for how I do all of this and take breaks and sleep, because I have to sleep a lot actually, because I have some chronic conditions and stuff. So I have to watch my energy levels and do crazy things to keep them going. So maybe that would be fun to do sometime, because I think people assume that I do a lot more than I do because I just have all these systems set up so that I can actually take breaks when I need to. But for tonight, we're talking book blurbs, and I totally welcome your Q&A. I will not be able to like individually look through all of your book blurbs tonight. Hopefully after some of my quick tips and tricks and common questions, you get a sense of why. They're a bit more personalized than just doing a log line, and they take a little more research. But I am happy to answer your questions, give you thoughts on different things, etc. At the end. And hopefully some of those questions will be answered during my quick presentation here. And for this, it's going to be me talking, and then I'm also going to share my screen some and to look at different blurbs and to just break it down for you. Why certain things work, why things don't work, and how a book blurb, book description, etc. really fits into your overall ecosystem as an author and really makes your life a lot easier. I tell people that I've seen authors like spend all this time on social media or all of this time fretting about, how many followers they have or their rankings, and their blurbs aren't where they need to be. And if the blurb isn't there, if that infrastructure, that foundation isn't there, it really doesn't matter what you're doing on social media. Really, 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 this comes first. So we're going to be talking about full blurbs, which are, those are just the basic full back cover copy that you're going to find on the back cover of your book, or if an agent or editor asks for one sheet, it's going to be there. or you'll put it on your website next to the picture of your book cover, on pitch proposals, etc. We'll do a little talk about short blurbs, which those are snippets of the full blurb. And in almost all cases, if your main blurb is awesome, your short blurb is super easy to put together. And I mean that as someone who, I know I do this a lot, and you're thinking, well, maybe it's easy for you. But if you invest in a good full blurb, then you're just taking bits and pieces apart, I promise you. And then there's book descriptions. The reason I set them apart from the blurbs is because often if you're doing a one sheet at a conference, you're not going to include like keywords, optimization extras. You're not going to include content ratings there. You're going to be just put the blurb there and hope it catches the interest of the agent or the editor. But I am going to showcase that a little bit in the different parts of a blurb, because if you're the kind of person who's doing DIY, if you're doing self-pub as well as trying to pursue traditional pub, which I do both as well, then you'll want to know this for yourself. You'll want to know how this works for yourself. So let's dive right in with this. So give me a sec to share my screen with you. I can do that. We got this, right? All right, it's all ready. So the anatomy of a blurb is going to be a hook, intro, inciting incident, the quest, and the stakes for failure on the quest. Maybe a second hook at the end, or that question of, will they escape or not? Read to find out, which is a little cheesy, but occasionally works sometimes depending on your genre. And then at the bottom of that, you're going to find keywords, additional info, other series books, content ratings, especially if this is a book description for Amazon. Again, if you are doing a one sheet or a pitch proposal for a publishing house, then you're not going to include the keywords at the bottom as much. You're going to try to format it a little more according to the standards of the publishing house or the agency, or etc. So that's how these things look a little bit different. And I know I just threw all those words at you, so this is where I'm going to share my screen and go through what these different parts of a book blurb look like from different book blurbs. Some of them are my own. One of them I wrote for a client. One of them is for someone that you might know who did a previous book backpack session here. And hopefully just having things identified is going to help you to start breaking it to pieces and really seeing how everything interacts with each other. So let's go for this. Come on, tech, you can do this. Okay, I think it's this one. So hopefully you can see my screen. Everyone should see I killed a shifter on purpose. That one, yay. Okay. So the first blurb up here is for an urban fantasy book. And I'll first off say that genre does matter a lot with blurbs. And so before I'm creating a blurb for anyone, I'm going to look at all the different blurbs in that genre, what works, what doesn't. I'm going to probably research 10 to 20 to 30 different blurbs and see what's following the different rules sort of marketing copy, what's doing it well, what's connecting well, what isn't connecting well, etc. So that's part of just what I do. But in this case, the hook here is, so I accidentally killed a shifter on purpose. And again, I know my genre, they know what shifters are, they know animal shape shifters. And so I chose something really quirky at the top. Your hook is going to be something weird, something quirky, something people aren't going to expect, something that's going to keep them reading through the rest of the blurb. It's probably the part, if you're the kind of person who doesn't love marketing copy, who thinks, oh, it's cheesy and that doesn't work on me, you're not going to like hooks, because that's where you have to do all of that part. What you have to get over in part is that while it may not work on you, a lot of authors are actually in the minority of how people's brain works. Our brains work differently. My background is in a lot of cross-cultural communication and psychology and studying of neurodivergence. Authors have a lot of neurodivergent people there. So you have to kind of get out of your own head and turn off your own voice that says, well, I think that's dumb, so it's not going to work, and open yourself up to how things have worked, what the data says does work according to decades and decades and decades of experience, not just what you might find cheesy or not cheesy. So just let's unpack that a little bit right away. So here we have the hook. I accidentally killed a shifter on purpose with genie powers I shouldn't be able to use thanks to my curse mark. So right away we have killing someone accidentally on purpose. We have powers I shouldn't be able to use, but I did. This is a lot of contrast, a lot of inherent conflict. That's going to catch people's attention. And so that's setting up the rest of your story. And here, you know, they lost a job as a romantic investigator. She's on death row. We have this whole inciting incident here. And then we have the quest, an oddly outgoing vegetarian vampire lawyer who seems strangely familiar. And, you know, almost like we've met before, wishing us won't get out of this mess, but my forbidden wish magic just might. And the reason I chose this is because this, yes, it's a book I wrote and I like it, but without fault, when I put ads on this blurb, it gets read through in the thousands, in the 10,000s. When I direct traffic, it converts. So I'm not just trying to show you something to make myself feel good. I'm showing you something that I know works to give you some ideas, okay? So this part of this is actually the whole blurb here. We have the intro. In this case, I did a little bit of cheating. I put the inciting incident where she kills the grizzly before the intro. It worked for the genre. And then I have this hook at the end where it suggests what might solve the problem. This ending hook, by the way, if you're struggled with it, you're not alone. This is one of the hardest parts to do in a book, a blurb. And then at the end, this is where I kind of have all of that extra content. So if you're going to be pitching to an agent, you're not going to have buy now, here's all the other books I've written, etc. This is all sales copy that gives you comp titles, urban fantasy, that's Angel meets I Dream of Genie, has a romantic subplot, but nothing graphic. This is a content rating down here for a blurb. So it's going to tell you that there's going to be some heat. And then gleeful send-ups of many romantic fantasy tropes, which means if you like those tropes, if you like enemies to lovers, this may not be your book because I'm going to skewer them. And then the otter shifter, I actually highlighted that later because everyone liked him so much that I added that to this extra content. And then for this one, I also put all the other books in the series down below. So if you're the kind of author who is trying to write blurbs and you already have a lot of indie books out and you're not trying to organize them, connecting them all here at the bottom of your book description on Amazon is a way to do that. And it encourages people, first of all, that there's books in the series that they can read. They're going to be able to read for a while. And there's going to be a lot of different places for them to go. This is also a form of sort of keyword stuffing. So on search engines, this book description is going to come up a lot for all of these titles. So it's a great way to mess with the SEO here. So you see how this can get a little complicated, but I wanted to show you something that really had performed well and does perform well. And then this is one that I did for a client, and it was for a sweet romance. And actually, again, if you look down here, this is where I call, you know, the italic area where you're going to add the extra keywords and stuff. It's a sweet, clean romance with a side of thriller and lots of delicious cooking. You have the hook, a perfect job, a handsome pilot, a side of unexpected danger. So all of these things that are going to try to connect with that ideal reader a bit more. They're going to try to filter out the readers you want from the readers you don't. So if you're reading this, if there's a guy who's reading this, he's not into Hallmark movies, probably that opening blurb, this opening section is going to go, yeah, this isn't for me. Like, who wants, you know, to hear about a handsome pilot and a perfect job? Like, who even cares? That's great. He doesn't have to read it. So part of this, when you're doing these blurbs, is in fact to sift out people who aren't meant to read them. So that's one thing I want to caution you when you're writing book blurbs. I think a lot of times we can go to one or two areas. We can think, I don't like doing this. No one's going to like this. Ugh. Or we can try so hard to please everyone that you're not going to actually tell your story. So it's important to kind of find a middle ground between those two. And I think, oh, I have some people in the chat. Okay. I just want to make sure I hadn't missed any questions or anything. So we have the intro where all she wanted to do was pay off her student loans from dropping out of med school. Notice even here, the character is not starting off in an ordinary place. She just dropped out of med school. That's not an ordinary place. So this is a bit of a good sign that this is a good story, because no story should have a character starting off in a completely ordinary place unless its very ordinariness is so extreme that that's part of the story. So be advised of that. We're going to talk about that a little later when we talk about how book blurbs can show you if your book works. We have her becoming a home health aide, and she just quietly serves while the highly skilled Mitchells perform their daring search and rescue missions. And of course, since this is a romance, part of the intro is going to involve the guy, because in a romance blurb, you have to include the guy. You don't have to, but it helps because readers are there for the romance. So think about it from that perspective. So you have an intro of the girl, we have an intro of the guy, and then we have inciting incident. She's kidnapped by treacherous enemies who see her as the weak link. If they have her way, she'll be the ultimate weapon against the family she's come to love. And then can this man and this woman who believe that they shouldn't be together save each other, and, you know, fireworks and cute moments and lots of tasty food. It's a very cute book, by the way. Love it. But you see how that kind of fits together. We have that hook, we have the intros here, we have the inciting incident, and we have sort of this stakes of, you know, if they don't get her back, she'll be the ultimate weapon. And so it's a little bit, and you might say, well, that's not like right in order. Well, marketing copy kind of isn't. You have to figure those things out and then tweak it and tweak it. We'll go to that later, but you can see how those things are fitting in there. And then here's another one. I wanted to give you a couple of different options here. This is from my YA fantasy romance that also just basically sells itself with or without ads. And actually I sold out of this at a recent conference, mostly because I just picked it up and left with it after buying it, I will say. They didn't just steal it. An outcast prince, a captive healer, a single knight that changes their destinies. So again, outcast prince, not a normal prince, captive healer, single knight that changes their destinies. That's quite a big hook promise there. That's going to keep people going. And in fact, I mentioned short blurbs. You can make them right from your main blurb. You can just scoop this up. I've scooped this up and put this on marketing copy. And it makes my life easier. So someone says, well, how did you make a graphic? I'm like, I went onto Canva, took a photo, took an element of the blurb, made a graphic. So if you invest in a good blurb, it really makes your life easier. This one is a bit different because while I have the intro here of the girl who can't, you know, amend her, and I have the intro of the guy, and because it's a romance, it's a Cinderella story, you know, you're going to want to see the girl and the guy introduced there. That's important. I also have these elements here. She lives a nightmare, he's haunted by dreams, met by midnight, their fates are entwined. That's not normal or regular. And that's why one reason I wanted to show you this is that for this case, because I included a lot of poetry in this book as a key plot element, I tweaked the blurb to include sort of a poetic element as a warning to readers. I had readers who said we would have liked this even more without the poetry. Well, you know, you read the blurb and it was kind of weird and poetic, and the first page is poetic. So that's just what it is. I did the best I could to warn you. So sometimes you can get away with that in blurbs where you can add these little extra elements in here. I will say I've only done this with about 2 or 3 blurbs I've ever written because it is really challenging to do it right, and it can easily turn off readers. So this is one of those little outliers. A lot of blurbs look a little bit more like this, you know, the hook, the intro, the doom, the stakes. But this is one that I went a little bit irregular to try to showcase more of the elements in the books. And then at the end, of course, you know, I have this YA romance features Cinderella in an original fantasy world with a dystopian twist. That's only on Amazon. It's not on the back cover copy. It's not on my website, but it does help with the search engines to find things. Okay, let's keep going down here. This follows all the usual beats. The reason that I highlighted this is that it has mermaids meet mental health and this lighthearted story of life, love, and learning to grow into who you're meant to be. You might ask why I did that. Why not just have this hook here? You know, their love is true, but is it real? That's a nice hook. Why do you need this up here? I actually did market research and found out for YA titles that match this one, they had these kind of intros ahead of time from major houses, from smaller houses. The successful books had this sort of intro. Mental health in the teen community is kind of a big deal right now and has been for the last couple of years. And so knowing that and having this wonderful phrase of mermaids meets mental health, which is great alliteration, I opted to use that as an intro because I knew that some people would pick up the book purely because of that. Moms would pick it up for their teens because they wanted to do that. And because it's a very sweet story, I knew that I was probably also targeting moms who wanted sweet stories for their teen readers, maybe like homeschool or that kind of stuff, where they were concerned about content. This was going to be very safe. But again, it has the intro of Jacob, who's fearing of inheriting his father's hallucinations and memory loss. We have the intro of Seven Siak, and this is a romance, so got to introduce the main couple. And then when she returns, he's gone because he thinks he was a hallucination. Will they get together? We don't know. Of course they do. It's a sweet romance. Another reason that I put this at the top is that some people are really sensitive about trigger warnings and content warnings these days. And so if someone's concerned that they just went through something with mental health and they don't want to deal with that in fiction, this right away will say, hey, this isn't your book. That's okay. Keep moving on. So when you're writing blurbs, yes, it's good to sell your book and to have all those elements, but it's also, I think, good to take a responsibility for how you're marketing your book to the right people and warning people who won't want it. I write sweet books. I also write books that have a little bit of language and a little bit of heat. It's closed door, fade to black, but some people don't want that. So I try my best with my blurbs to indicate the differences there so that people understand that and can find the books they want. And down here, I chose a Tosca Lee blurb. And the reason I chose this was partly because it breaks the whole thing of having the hook, because it has, okay, a frightening, believable thriller. All right, that sounds intriguing. From New York Times bestselling author and master storyteller Tosca Lee. It throws her name right there at the beginning. You can do that if you have a big enough name. So if you are Stephen King, you can say, in this latest bestseller by Stephen King, that is your hook. He has a whole fan base. Tosca Lee is big enough. She has a fan base there. James Rollins has a fan base. I mean, you can just go through all these different authors who have, you know, the latest from, trying to think of Frank Peretti or the latest from this, then you can put your name at the beginning and that's fine. I don't recommend you do this kind of blurb for yourself unless you're that kind of a big name or you're trying to really reach that, because people don't care about you as much. You know, hook them with your story. But if you're Tosca Lee, then you can get away with that. So I wanted to explain what that is in case you went online and said, hey, Janeen, you said to do it this way, but they're doing it that way and they're famous. I'm like, yeah, they're famous, so they can do it that way. And this is even another one. This is for the Progeny, which I think this one got optioned as a TV series. I don't know if it's gotten made yet. I really want it to be made, but I don't know, like, who knows if things will happen. Again, it opens with New York Times bestselling author Tosca Lee. And then it brings a modern twist to an ancient mystery surrounding Elizabeth Bathory, the most notorious female serial killer of all time. There's your hook. So not only does it have her name, but it still keeps that hook there. And since her audience for this is thrillers, you know, notorious female serial killers, that's going to hook true crime readers. That's going to hook thrillers. That's not going to hook people looking for sweet and fluffy romance, and that's okay. So again, these hooks are there to divide the readers who will like your book from the readers who will not like your book. So don't be afraid of your book's content. Make sure that you're doing it in a way that is going to celebrate what you do and connect to those ideal readers who need to read what you do. Don't try to say, oh, well, I don't know if they're going to like this, and maybe I'll just sneak in this way. No, just say it. All right, going to stop the share. So So hopefully that gave you a good overview to start thinking about how to look at blurbs. I know some of you may hire someone for blurbs. A lot of you are probably going to do it yourself. And I respect that. I do blurbs as a service, but I also respect that sometimes you don't have time, money, budget, et cetera, or you think you can do it yourself. So I'm just happy to help you unpack that copy a little more and start looking at them a different way. The cool thing is if you really get into this, then you can never look at a blurb the same way again because you're saying, oh, what's their hook? Oh, what's this? Did I like that closing thing? Are the stakes high enough? I don't know. It just becomes a whole fun thing, and then you do it as your part of your job. All right. So moving on a bit to some common do's and don'ts with blurbs. And hopefully this will help you as you're going ahead to write your own. So I have organized this into 3 areas: easy fixes for your blurb, medium fixes for your blurb, and hard fixes for your blurb. So easy fixes. This is if your book is like awesome and easy to market and you have all the tropes, but it's just not quite working. For these, you need to go through and check that you have stronger and simpler words. Blurbs are not the place to pull out your 5 or 6 syllable words. You have people's attention for maybe a second, 2 seconds, 5 seconds. Also, make sure that sort of the wording in your blurb matches the wording of your book. If your book is super, super casual and your blurb is super formal, it's going to send the wrong message to people because it's like you're advertising something different from the way you've written the book. So stronger and simpler words, stronger verbs, stronger adjectives, also keywords. If you're writing a Cinderella story of some kind, make sure that you're putting in Cinderella elements of some kind, like, you know, oppression or slave or servant or ball, things like that. You know, think about, you know, look at other blurbs that in the genre that are similar to yours and start picking out those keywords. There's also different searches you can do for performing keywords, but that's a good place to start, is just look at other blurbs. Second, highlight your tropes more specifically. So if your book is awesome and easy to market, make sure that you are really highlighting those tropes. If you have enemies to lovers, highlight it. If you have a cat and mouse game between a serial killer and a hard-bitten detective, highlight that, okay? If you think you're being clear, be clearer. This is from the world of marketing copy, where like you write the ad and then you like go back and you trim it again and you trim it again and you trim it again, and then you show it to your friends who are copywriters and they shred it and you do it again. So make sure that you're highlighting those tropes really specifically. Listen to your beta readers, to people who really love your book, who know your genre. Listen to what they're saying and highlight those things they love more. Last thing for, again, this is for easy fixes, cut out wordiness. You can never go wrong cutting out wordiness. Now, depending on how complicated your book is, there's only so much you can cut out, because you may be like, well, Janeen, I am telling an epic story on 5 worlds. That's fair. You're probably not going to get it down to 1 paragraph. But do the best you can to cut out wordiness. Every single word counts. And that's something that is what I do a lot for, like maybe my quick edits or things like that, is I'll do, you know, simpler words, highlight the tropes, do some research, get more keywords, cut out wordiness. Now on to medium fixes. Your book is awesome, but it's not easy to market. Maybe the genre is weird. Maybe you're doing a mashup of 3 genres. Maybe you're a new author and no one knows about you. And so it's just hard to get people's attention onto it. Maybe you have an unusual topic or unusual take on the topic. Maybe you're not going to deliver the HEA that they want. And you're like, oops, I'm going to make people mad here. If you have to do a blurb like that or fix it, review and research your market a lot. Know how your book is the same and different from things in your market. See how authors who are getting the reviews, who are getting the sales, who are getting the attention, see how they're doing it. And check all of that a lot more, because you need that help, because it's not going to be an easy sell. Met by Midnight is a young adult Cinderella retelling, sweet romance, fantasy world. Did not take me a long time to write that blurb. Does not take it long to sell. I have a steampunk fantasy in a different world with 5 cities and shifters and magic that's not magic. That blurb took me longer. That one takes me longer to sell. It finds its audience, but it's just weirder. The second thing you need to do is amplify common ground with the reader. Introduce things they will like. If you're going to have lots of weird stuff they're not used to, look for things that they will be used to. So for example, the steampunk one, which has all the weird things in it, I mean, once people read it, they enjoy it, but it takes a bit to get there. I introduce fish out of water. I have a dragon who can shift into human form, who is trying to pretend to be human and doesn't know what she's doing and is trying to figure things out with this airship captain. And there's lots of cultural conflict and, you know, her saying, well, human stuff is dumb. And I pull that out because that's something people can laugh over. I'm not going to go into all the political intrigue very much. I'm not going to go into all the complexity. I'm going to go with what is a common ground with people. What can they understand? They can understand a war. I'm not going to go into the details of a war, but they can understand a war. They can understand people on different sides having to work together. We're going to stick with that. And then also a medium fix if your book is kind of weird, different, you know it's good, but it's not easy to market. Include more awards and endorsements and stuff. That's where you do that. Because, you know, people are going to pick up your book and be like, I don't know what flavor this is. It's like raspberry, jujube, pistachio, cilantro. I don't know if I want that today. So your job is to find common ground and say, okay, well, the cilantro is not bad. Hey, do we like raspberry? We like raspberry? Let's go with that. Okay. So that's where you need to include the endorsements and the awards because you want people to take that risk and they need the encouragement to take that risk more with those types of books. Whereas if you're selling someone, again, on a sweet YA Cinderella retelling, it sells itself. A lot of people just want that anyway. There's readers who just read Cinderella retellings. You don't need to tell them that this reviewer loved it, just give them the book. So that's where you have to think about that. And then on to hard fixes. And this is always the awkward one. It's why I have to vet out people I work with because sometimes they come in and they say, I just want a quick edit. I got this. I know what I'm doing. So I ask them a few more questions and I go, so your book is not where it needs to be. And this is actually one of the reasons why people will ask for those blurbs on the one sheets and proposals is because you can't hide in a book blurb. Or if you can, you're lying about your book and that's not good. A book blurb will show you right away if your inciting incident isn't strong enough or you don't have one. It's merciless. If you sit there and go, well, what's the major thing that happens in the beginning of the book and it disrupts things? It's kind of this and it's kind of that. Like, if you don't have one concrete moment, you got a problem with your story structure. If you don't have like stakes that are high enough or they don't make sense with your inciting incident, like if their car breaks down and so their solution is to try to go to the movies, like that, those things don't connect together. We need to fix the car. Why are we going to a movie? So the blurb will show that. Your book could also not be about the character you think it's about. So if you find yourself writing a blurb for your book and a supporting character's journey sounds way more interesting than the main characters, you might have the wrong protagonist in your story, or you might have a supporting character who's taking over all the cool parts. That's going to be a hard sell to publishing houses. That's going to be a hard sell to readers. That's going to be just a hard sell across the board. You also could be breaking so many tropes that no one gets it. So like if you have 10 different flavors in this book and they're all the same like degree of flavorness. So it's like equal parts chocolate and cilantro and parsley and pistachio. And we're going to just toss in some graham crackers and marshmallow and some mango bubble beads and stuff like that. If you keep tossing all those tropes in so much, it's going to be so much of everything that it's nothing. It's kind of like putting too many ingredients on a plate of food. It's going to be difficult for others to enjoy. You may think it's really fun. And again, I saying this as gently as I can, I have had books like this. I've had many books I had to shred because I put everything in the kitchen sink in them. And I thought it was amazing. And my readers said, yeah, we don't get this. It's kind of like the kid that you put down and they're painting something and they use all the colors in the paint and it kind of turns weird and brown and this stuff. And they're really proud of it. And you're like, that's great. And I'm sure you enjoyed it. And they say, I want to sell this for like $20. And you go, That's another story. So if you want to break 20 million tropes and do it for yourself because you enjoy it, go for it. But blurbs and these things are about selling things and connecting with readers and finding readers who will love it. It's going to be a lot harder to find readers who love something that's that jumbled. They're just not in the mood for it. And last thing with hard fixes is if you're using tropes from one genre and another genre, and this can happen sometimes to newer authors or just if you're reading out of a genre a lot, you start using your suspense and cat and mouse tropes in your sweet romance. Well, the problem with that is that people don't read sweet romance for serial killers and cat and mouse things and grand theft auto or stuff like that. They're reading it for warm and fuzzies and cute things. And so you need to be careful with that. Okay, so now that I kind of crushed all that, that's one of the hardest things I have to do with authors is when they talk to me about their blurb and I go, oh boy, your story. I am sorry to tell you this. Your story does not work and your blurb is showing that. You have to go back to the drawing board. Now, here are some ways to make this easier. You can try any of these, all of these. I'm not forcing you to do this. If you want to have your crazy book that's exactly the way you want it, I'm not stopping you. But I'm just speaking from someone who understands the sales marketing side of this and also really wants your books to be read. Blurb your book before you finish drafting it or during the editing stage. This is one of the most useful things you can do, even if it's like terrible and you know that it can be trimmed down and you're gonna hire it out or something. Write that blurb, a very basic blurb, during drafting or during editing. See if you have a hook. See if you have an intro that makes sense, an inciting incident that works, stakes that are high enough. Show it to friends and say, ignore the craft. I know I use the word rage 20 times in this because the bad guy's really bad, but does this sound interesting? Does this make sense to you? Something else to make it easier on yourself is you can have a really killer main concept, and that's where it helps with log lines, which I know you did last week. If you have a really killer high concept, main concept, a good inciting incident and tension level, that makes it easier. And you can control that. You can write the book, you can rewrite the book. The more that you try to say, well, maybe I just want a chill inciting incident. I just feel like that. I'm so tired of the cliches, Janeen. Like who needs a strong inciting incident? Can I just like, kind of cruise through it? You can, but it's a lot harder and people may not get it. And you're going to have to beef up other parts of your book. So the more that you can follow some of those basic structural rules, the better people will connect with it. Another way to make it easier on yourself when you're writing a blurb is include more tropes as you can, or at least have awareness about these tropes. Again, this goes back to, you may not feel creative to use tropes. Maybe you're a discovery writer and you don't think about it. But the more that you can kind of pull things out that are kind of sort of trope-ish or work with that, the easier a sell it's going to be. And I'll talk about this because Heidi talks about this all the time. When UP was acquiring her book Ashen, I was like, so it's a Cinderella story. And she's like, I guess, yeah, yeah, it can be. I'm like, we're going to work to make this a Cinderella story because you have the elements here. And you have so many quirky things. She's got a firecracker in that book, which is amazing. And I was like, can we scoot some of these smaller elements close enough to Cinderella? Can we scoot in a ball scene? Can we just make her life a little bit harder and get it into the Cinderella category? Can we do it? And she was open to that and such, because I mean, she was signing with a small press and she knew that I had a vision for this, and we negotiated how she would do that so she didn't feel like she was giving up her creative control over things in all the ways, but that it was going to connect with that audience, and it worked. And it got lots of reviews. And did some readers go, is this really Cinderella? Yeah. It's true, but it's close enough. We got it into the genre, and it made it easier to connect with readers who, even if there are readers who said, I kind of feel like this isn't entirely Cinderella, they said, but I don't care, I love it anyway. And that's what really matters. And it's not a farce. It does have those elements in it enough. It's just not as strong as some stories. The last thing you can do to make it easier to write blurbs is write simpler stories. And this is something that I believe in anyway, as a former complicated story writer. 10 years ago, I wrote out 16 races for a fantasy world, and I had them all organized. Did not have a story. I had 16 million stories. But eventually I realized I really just wanted to get books written more than I wanted to create all the races, although I loved doing that. So if you can make your story as simple as you can, it doesn't mean you have to oversimplify it, as simple as possible until you go, okay, I can't make it any simpler. I have to have these complexities here. Then you're going to be a lot better off in terms of writing your blurb. So when you can simplify it, it will actually also make your story itself better. Because one of the things I often see with newer authors especially is that they overcomplicate their stories. And even intermediate authors, as we overcomplicate our stories. And if you add too much overcomplication, especially in science fiction and fantasy, it can get a lot harder to find that strong narrative thread that is really what people are following. So it doesn't take much to write a story. Your problem and solution, follow those basic story beats, keep it simple. And finally, the last thing for this is when you're doing your blurbs, test them, and test them again. So test out your blurbs with multiple audiences, especially readers. Take what they say with a grain of salt, but readers in your genre, your ideal reader, their opinion matters more than your author friend who likes to edit things. And that's what I tell people too. Like when I'm working on a blurb with someone, I will test it out with readers and take what they take into account. Because yes, I've done all the market research and I am a marketing strategist, not just an editor. So I do know how to do all of that. But the best marketing strategists know that if you don't have testing, then all you're doing is basically kind of puffing up your own ego and assuming you know everything, and we don't. So test it out with readers, test it out in groups of readers, take their feedback. It might be brutal, it might be confusing, take it with a grain of salt, but test things out. Also, get data by testing out blurbs with ads, or if you're not doing ads, promotional graphics, group shout outs. A lot of reader groups will have readers go up and say, does anyone have a book that? I want a book that has. I really need a book that has this, but not this, and this over here. Throw your book down there. Comment with your book when readers ask for it. If it fits what they want, okay, don't just throw it in randomly. And see what the reaction is. That's authentic market research that you can do that doesn't require you to run ads or even have a book published. You can just throw out ideas. Don't be afraid to do that. You might get some pretty blunt answers. So you have to kind of put on humility and afterwards maybe have a little bit of a vent with a trusted writer friend, but it's worth it to get the feedback. So test them out, try them out, tweak them, etc. But make sure you're getting that data when you're doing it. Don't just go, I hate this blurb. I've been working on it for 20 days and I hate it. So I'm just going to kill it all and do it all over again and make it like this person's. That may not work at all. Okay. You have to actively test it. You have to actively get feedback. And don't feel bad if you have to keep doing blurbs over and over. That's called being a professional. There's some idea that, it has to be perfect the first time. Marketing copy is always changing. Kind of the same way that books always have different covers depending on how trends change in book covers. So don't be afraid if you have to tweak it, change it, get feedback on it, etc. It will make your book blurb better and it will make your book better. Alrighty. Thank you for listening to all of this. Hopefully that was helpful. And I see a question here. So your blurb is something you can put on your one sheet. Many one sheets request blurbs. And I guarantee you at that table, that agent or that editor knows the tropes, knows the keywords, knows the expectations. They are looking for a hook. They are looking for intro. They are looking for stakes. They are looking for potential content issues or draws to your book. They are going to look at it with that angle because on this side of the industry, we're looking at this stuff constantly. So make sure that you're doing that too. Can you run through the anatomy elements of a blurb once more? Sure, and I just did. So hook at the top. One of the easy ways to do this kind of hook, I'm going to see if I can share my screen again. The problem is I can't always see the questions, but let's do a screen share. Okay. I think that one. Okay, cool. All right, so hopefully you see my screen, only this time when I just start typing things out for you. Let's see, and can I see the chat? I can see the chat? There we go. All right, yes. So the anatomy elements of a blurb. You're gonna have a hook. And usually at the top of your hook, I don't know what I just did to my screen. It's gonna be like your log line, honestly. So that log line you did last week or that you go back and do, a lot of times your log line is going to be similar to that hook. This has actually changed. Now that with the advent of ebooks and the internet, the necessity of having that log line at the very top has become a lot more important because that's above the fold on Amazon. So people are looking for that a lot more. Their brains have been programmed more to expect that at the top than they have in the past. I have been looking at the backs of books and looking at different blurbs and that stuff for over 15 years because I'm a marketing nerd. And I did this even before I got paid for it because I'm a marketing nerd. And I have seen log lines become a lot more common. I think it's the influence of TV, the influence of things like Twitter and such. People are expected to be succinct and get it out right from the beginning. So with the hook, one way to do it is like, I call it one word, 1, 2, 3, where you have like, an orphan child, a desperate hangman, a journey they must attempt or die, something like that, where it's like quick little words there. So that's a really easy way to start a hook for a story. Or you can just do an adaptation of a log line. Then you're going to want your intro. So it's going to enter your protagonist and starting situation. If you're doing a romance, you might be introing protagonist and secondary protagonist because that's how romances roll. But otherwise, protagonist and starting situation, they were down on the luck so-and-so and so, dealing with having to feed pigs or something, and then you're inciting incident. This happened. Doom, destruction, everything changed. And then to solve this problem, this is where you have that quest. Now that their world was destroyed, they have to journey over here to save the rest of the world from becoming like them or something like that. And that's where you're going to find your some of your goals here. So you're kind of your incident, goals, etc. What are they trying to accomplish here? And then finally, stakes for failure or turning away. What will go boom or be horrible if they don't succeed? This changes depending on your genre. The killer will continue killing people. The madman will loathe the world. The main couple will never be together and will be alone and sad and lost and never understand how much they could be together. There's romance. Okay. And then at the end, you're going to have what I call a second hook. And that's like, can they find each other before time runs out? I'm not going to lie, your second hook is probably going to be your hardest thing to do. And it's probably going to be the hardest one that people are going to keep picking at you for. And then at the end, that's where you can put, like, if you're writing a book description, this is not for one sheets, but for a book description on Amazon for an indie published book, you might have italics. And that's where you're going to have sort of the content ratings and like, this is a trope plus a trope plus a trope plus a trope. There is kissing, ta-da, things like that. All right. What are the differences between back cover blurbs and Amazon blurbs? There are differences. Back cover blurbs are mostly just the main blurb. Amazon blurbs are product descriptions. That's where you're going to start the keyword stuffing at the bottom. So you're going to say, enjoy this book, or you might even say buy this book. Again, this is where that sort of the cheesy advertising stuff comes in. But it has been proven that if you actually say, enjoy this book or buy this book at the bottom of your prescription, it will nudge people closer to doing that. It's a suggestion technique. If you don't like that, you don't have to use it, but the data stands behind it. So I'm going to share that with you because it does work. I don't use it for all of my descriptions, but the data supports that kind of word suggestion. And then this is where you're also going to kind of put your content ratings. So, you know, mature themes of ... and ... If you want people to understand that, you know, if you want people to understand this is going to have some scenes of like mild abuse or sensuality or innuendo or that kind of stuff. And you might go, well, Janeen, won't that turn away people? Like, that's where you have to like overcome that judgment inside your head. If you had someone look at you and say, well, your book has a little bit of innuendo and that is so not cool. So like, I'm not going to read it. And then you may say, well, then I'll never say that it has innuendo because no one will read it. That's not true. It just means that person doesn't like it. And they don't have to like the innuendo. Okay. That's not their job. But other people may not find that humor like a bad thing. They enjoy it. Some people like books with cute dogs. Some people can't stand books with cute dogs. So own what's in your book and use it to attract people. And you got to put blinders on against the people who will say, well, like, I didn't like that part. So like, whatever. It's like, if they're not your ideal reader, what they don't like is probably what your ideal reader does like. So just factor that in when you think about putting those like content warnings, content features in, you know, saying, hey, it does have this mature stuff. If you're in the mood for a more mature book that is going to deal with really hard, gritty topics, this is your book. And it's okay to put that because some people don't want Hallmark all the time. Some people don't want fluffy, clean reads all the time. They're allowed to find books they want too. Yeah. Oh, sorry, Pam. I will definitely keep that in prayer for you with that, Anna. Sorry to hear that. All right. So hopefully that answered some questions there for you. Honestly, one of the biggest things I see with authors with this is when you're making sure that you're really owning your books and understanding what makes them awesome and just putting it out there boldly. I think a lot of times we can get stuck in our own heads a lot. We don't think about the things in our books that are good and are going to connect with people. And so we can forget about them and then don't know how to share them, especially at the end of a long day when you're like, oh, I don't really feel like talking about this. Who really needs this? Like, no one wants this. I just want to sit here and like binge read something myself. But as communicators, as Christians, we are called to share these good words with others. If you honestly believe that your book has been given to you to polish, write, rewrite, cry over, rewrite, and get all the way there, and it gets published somehow, and you put the work in, then you need to share it because someone needs to read it. I just finished a book about space vampires. It was what I needed to read. I was sick over the weekend. I needed something that was fluffy, but science fiction, but space vampires, but Star Trek. And if that hadn't been advertised, I wouldn't have found it. And that was by a Christian author. So put the work in to know your message and know why you're doing it and pray over it, and then be bold about sharing it because people do need those words.
Wow.
Okay. All right.
That's so awesome. So good. Oh, so appreciate your heart for that. And I'm telling you, like, I don't know about everybody else, but I feel empowered to be able to do it. And I realized why I hired this stuff out.
Yeah. And there's right? No shame in that either.
Nope, not a bit. Because you're right. It is a craft unto itself. So yeah, I appreciate all that you shared. We are gonna call it a night for everybody. Okay. So much information, and thank you so much, Janeen. I mean, it really good.
My pleasure.
Yes, I can't believe you got all of that into an hour. So good.
I was a teacher for 8 years, so I got this. We're gonna
I can tell. Yes. And be sure to go if I've got that link to the download. So I've already pulled it up, downloaded it, so you guys can do that and go through it. Just a quick reminder, next Tuesday, we're going over query letters that will translate into one sheets. And you've heard a little bit about one sheets tonight. So that'll be that. And then just remember, all of this is preparing us for pitch practice with Thomas Umstadt Jr. And that'll be the next week. So gather all of the things. I know, this is so good. So thank you all for being here tonight, and we will see you on the flip side.